He was just this knucklehead. I knew him before he was, a president. He was just a guy who was chasing girls. Every time you went out, he'd come over and be like, what's the name of that girl? That's all he was.
George Clooney just tore into Donald Trump on live TV, and it's nothing short of epic. In a moment that left jaws on the floor, Clooney fired back with the kind of confidence and wit that only he could deliver. From calling out Trump's Hollywood elite label to exposing the hypocrisy of his attacks, Clooney didn't just defend himself, he shattered Trump's narrative. And here's the real question: who's really out of touch here? And what does this clash say about leadership in America today?
Have you thought about writing an op-ed in the Times asking him to step down? Because it worked once. Why not try it again?
Yeah, he's a big fan of mine.
I know you're making your Broadway debut, which I found kind of crazy.
If you think about Donald Trump's transformation from a reality TV star to a political figure, it almost feels like a plot twist in some crazy drama. Back in the 2000s, Trump wasn't the face of the Republican Party or even a serious political figure. He was the host of The Apprentice, the guy who yelled, "You're fired," at contestants. People knew him for his flashy lifestyle and his name on gold-plated towers, not for any involvement in government. His life seemed like the ultimate celebrity fantasy, big, bold, and extravagant. But it wasn't anything that screamed future president. George Clooney, who knew Trump before his political rise, reflected on this very point in interviews. To Clooney and many others, Trump seemed like just another rich guy chasing fame. He was the type who was known for going to bars and asking about which cocktail waitress was single. He wasn't taken seriously as a potential leader of the country. Back in the day, Trump's brand was more about selling his name and living in a world of luxury than it was about making meaningful political change. He wasn't seen as someone who could transition from being a businessman to running a country.
There's not going to be a President Donald Trump. That's not going to happen.
And then, in 2015, Trump made an announcement that left everyone's jaw on the floor. He was running for president. At first, people laughed. They thought, this has to be some kind of joke. How could someone with no political experience, no deep understanding of government systems, and no track record of public service possibly take the reins of a country like the United States? But as we all know, Trump's rise wasn't just unexpected, it was unprecedented. In a political landscape dominated by career politicians, here comes a guy who doesn't play by the usual rules. He didn't need to win anyone over with policy proposals or speeches that sounded polished. Instead, Trump had this undeniable ability to grab attention, whether people loved him or hated him. That was his key advantage. He was a showman, a master of the media, and that's what people responded to. His unfiltered, no-holds-barred style turned him into the very thing America was fascinated by: a political outsider who didn't play it safe.
It's not going to happen because we're not going to be used. Fear is not going to be something that we're going to, that's going to be what drives our country. We're not going to be scared of Muslims or immigrants or, women. We're not actually afraid of anything. So, we're not going to use fear. So that's not going to be an issue.
One of the go-to jabs Donald Trump loves to throw at people he doesn't like is the term Hollywood elite. It's a phrase he often uses to discredit celebrities, especially those who speak out against him or his policies. For years, George Clooney has been one of Trump's favorite targets, labeled as an out-of-touch celebrity living in a bubble, far removed from the struggles of everyday Americans. Trump seems to think that if you're a Hollywood star, you have no connection to regular people and therefore your opinions don't matter. But Clooney didn't just take this lying down. Oh no, he had a lot to say about that. Clooney's response to the Hollywood elite label was powerful and personal. He grew up in Kentucky, far from the glitz and glam of Hollywood. He didn't come from a background of privilege. In fact, he worked a variety of tough, unglamorous jobs before he made it big in the entertainment industry. He sold insurance, worked at an all-night liquor store, cleaned theaters, and even cut tobacco on his family's farm. Clooney wasn't just talking about hardship for the sake of it. He was sharing his own real experiences, reminding people that his success wasn't handed to him on a silver platter. For Clooney, the Hollywood elite label didn't just miss the mark. It was a flat-out misrepresentation of his life. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Clooney didn't just defend himself. He called out Trump for being the ultimate hypocrite. Trump, the man who built an empire with his name stamped on gold-plated hotels, casinos, and towers, the guy who starred in his own reality TV show, how could he possibly call someone else out of touch? Clooney pointed out the irony of it all, saying, "The guy who takes a gold toilet is somehow the man of the people?" It's a bold statement, but it's one that highlights the ridiculousness of Trump's attack. How can Trump, who has lived his life in a bubble of extreme wealth and fame, accuse someone like Clooney, who worked hard for his success, of being out of touch with regular folks? It wasn't just a defense of Clooney's character, it was a critique of the double standard in Trump's accusations. Clooney worked hard, came from humble beginnings, and earned his success. Trump, on the other hand, came from a background of wealth and privilege. The contrast couldn't have been starker, and Clooney was quick to make that point.
All these cable news numbers, there's 24-hour news doesn't mean you get more news. It just means you get the same news more. So the more and more and more you hear, these guys, the ratings go up because they can show an empty podium saying Donald Trump is about to speak.
When George Clooney responded to Trump's attacks, it wasn't just about defending himself or taking a jab at the former president. Clooney wanted to make a much bigger point. Trump's constant use of labels, like Hollywood elite, says more about Trump than the people he's targeting. If you really stop and think about it, Trump's whole political strategy has been to label and discredit his critics, especially celebrities and public figures, in an attempt to minimize their influence. But what Clooney was getting at is that these labels often come from a place of insecurity, or a need to deflect attention from his own shortcomings. Rather than actually confronting the issues, Trump relies on using shallow labels to create division and distract people from the real problems facing the country. For Clooney, these attacks weren't just meaningless insults, they were indicative of a larger issue with how people are being manipulated in politics. Clooney wasn't just refuting Trump's accusations of being out of touch or elitist. He was calling on people to take a deeper look at the way political discourse is shaping up. He made it clear that success doesn't come from privilege alone. It comes from hard work, perseverance, and owning your own journey. It's easy for someone like Trump to dismiss people as Hollywood elites, but Clooney reminded everyone that many of the people in Hollywood are just regular folks who worked hard to get there. The larger message Clooney wanted to convey was that we shouldn't be distracted by these surface-level attacks. We need to start thinking critically about the real issues that matter, issues like leadership, accountability, and the policies that shape the future of the nation. If we get lost in the back and forth, in the insults and the distractions, we risk overlooking the things that actually have an impact on our lives. It's about encouraging people to look beyond the headlines and focus on the substance of leadership, who is leading, how they're leading, and what their policies mean for the future. During his appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live, Clooney made a point to shift the conversation from the circus that Trump often creates to something he thought was far more important: President Joe Biden's leadership. Clooney, who has been a vocal critic of Trump for years, used this moment to talk about the leadership qualities he believed were truly needed in the country, especially in times of division. He praised Biden for his decision to step back and allow for a transition of power if necessary, which he saw as a true sign of humility and dedication to the country's needs. What Clooney admired most about Biden's decision was that it wasn't about clinging to power for the sake of ego or legacy. It was about putting the needs of the country first and recognizing when it's time to let go for the greater good. Clooney argued that this was the kind of leadership the country needed, someone who wasn't so wrapped up in their own sense of self-importance that they would jeopardize the well-being of the nation. In contrast, Clooney pointed out, Trump's leadership was marked by constant distractions, chaos, and personal attacks. Rather than addressing the pressing issues facing America, Trump often chose to focus on tearing others down, creating division, and playing to his base with inflammatory rhetoric. Clooney's message was clear. While Biden was working to heal the country and bring people together, Trump's time in office often seemed like a never-ending spectacle. Clooney seemed to be calling on Americans to think about what really matters in leadership. It's not about the drama, the headlines, or the personal attacks. It's about who can bring people together, who has the humility to admit when things aren't working, and who can guide the nation toward progress. The back and forth between Donald Trump and George Clooney feels like the ultimate celebrity feud, but it's quickly turning into something much deeper. After Clooney's public comments about Trump's leadership and the Hollywood elite label, Trump wasted no time firing back. In typical Trump fashion, he called Clooney a fake actor and told him to stay out of politics. For Trump, it's almost as if any opinion that comes from someone in the entertainment industry doesn't count, especially if they're critical of him. But Clooney wasn't about to let that slide, and his response was sharp, witty, and, let's be honest, pretty satisfying. Clooney, known for his quick wit and fearless personality, didn't miss a beat. In response to Trump's demand for him to stay out of politics, Clooney fired back, "I'll step back when he does." It was a simple yet powerful remark that not only deflected Trump's criticism, but also put the focus back where it belongs, on the hypocrisy of Trump's own actions. Clooney wasn't just defending himself, he was making a larger statement about how leadership should be judged. This wasn't a spat about who's more Hollywood or elite, this was about the kind of leadership America needs. And for Clooney, Trump's style of leadership wasn't it.
Trump is actually a result, in many ways, of the fact that much of the news programs didn't follow up and ask tough questions. That's the truth.
By calling Clooney a fake actor, Trump was attempting to undermine Clooney's credibility, but Clooney's response reinforced that he wouldn't be silenced by insults. This wasn't about Hollywood credentials, it was about standing up for what he believed in, something Trump has often criticized in others. For Clooney, the exchange wasn't just about defending his career as an actor, it was about something much bigger, the kind of leadership that America should value and how toxic personal attacks have become in the political discourse. It's important to recognize that this back and forth between Clooney and Trump isn't just about actors or movie stars. It's part of a much larger conversation about what leadership looks like in America. At its core, it's a conversation about accountability, values, and how public figures in power should conduct themselves. Trump's frequent use of personal attacks has overshadowed the real issues at hand, from climate change to healthcare to the economy. Clooney's arguments have repeatedly pointed out that focusing on character assassinations, whether in Hollywood or in politics, distracts from the real work that needs to be done. The feud between Donald Trump and George Clooney has captured a lot of attention, but it's not just about celebrity egos. Clooney, much like many in Hollywood, has used his platform to speak out on important social issues, including refugee rights, press freedom, and international justice. Through his foundation, the Clooney Foundation for Justice, he's fought for human rights and supported efforts to promote justice and accountability on a global scale. Clooney's activism is a central part of who he is and has been for years. It's not just about making movies or looking good on the red carpet, he's actively trying to make a difference in the world. But with Trump's return to the White House, these issues could be at serious risk. Trump's stance on immigration, human rights, and international aid often directly clashes with the causes that Clooney champions. One of the most significant points of contention is Trump's America First policy, which has led to tighter restrictions on immigration, a reduced focus on global humanitarian aid, and a tendency to undermine international cooperation. These policies stand in stark contrast to Clooney's advocacy for refugees and displaced people, his efforts to shine a light on human rights violations, and his push for press freedom in oppressive regimes. If Trump's presidency returns to power, Clooney's work in these areas could be significantly challenged. Clooney, who has made a name for himself as a vocal critic of Trump, may find himself in a position where he has to either amplify his criticisms of the president or tread carefully in order to protect the causes he supports. Trump's policies could have a direct impact on the work Clooney is doing through his foundation, and there's a real possibility that the two men will come into direct conflict over these issues. Clooney, however, has never been one to back down in the face of opposition, especially when it comes to defending his values. If anything, his past resilience suggests that he'll continue to speak out no matter what Trump throws his way.
Clooney should get out of politics and go back to television. Movies never really worked for him.
I will if he does.
The potential ripple effects of Trump's policies on Hollywood and the entertainment industry are another important factor in this dynamic. As a prominent figure in Hollywood, Clooney is directly impacted by changes in tax regulations, censorship debates, and funding for the arts. Trump's administration has historically been at odds with the entertainment industry, and if he regains power, we could see even more policies aimed at restricting creative freedoms. From potential changes in tax laws that could affect film financing to debates over free speech and censorship, the entertainment world could find itself navigating a much more restrictive environment. This means that Clooney and his peers might have to be even more vocal in defending the values they hold dear, such as artistic expression and freedom of speech. Clooney has been unapologetic in his activism, and if faced with these challenges, it's likely he'll raise his voice even louder. He's shown time and again that he's willing to speak out for what he believes in, no matter the backlash. And with Trump's policies potentially creating new obstacles for the causes he supports, Clooney's role as a critic and activist could become even more vital. Hollywood has always been a place where political and social issues are debated and discussed, and if Trump's return to power threatens the very fabric of artistic freedom, Clooney will undoubtedly be one of the leading voices fighting to protect it. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.